Mama Africa, your children are home!
Hello everybody.
Hi.
Welcome back to our channel. I'm the one and only Anno.
And I'm Pablo, just Pablo.
And today we're going to be talking about one of the biggest things on our channel, since we haven't really discussed it. And it's 3 reasons why we don't speak to our children English.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people have commented and wondering, why do you not speak to your kids in English? And basically we have to come at it from the opposite direction. So why don't we speak to our kids in English, but why do we speak to them in these other languages? And so for me it's Spanish.
Right, and for me it's Yoruba. And it's my first language, it's my mother tongue.
So the reasons, there are 3 main reasons why we do that. Because we only speak to them directly. So it's one face, one language, and it's much easier for children. Children are able to do that really, really well. They're able to switch between languages as long as they have a language associated with a face. And so for me, in grad school and even earlier, I was doing research on kind of for myself, preparing for whenever I had children. How can they learn? How can they learn these languages in the house? And because I wanted to, whatever language I can share with my children, I wanted to share it. And so in this case, it ended up being Spanish. And I ended up, from anecdotes, from some research, ended up figuring out that, okay, so the way it works is basically one face to one language. Because people always say, oh, won't it confuse the kids? The kids never get confused. Their brains are amazing no matter what you do. But if you want them to learn a language really well, especially when you're surrounded by a stronger language, in our case we were surrounded in the Midwest, Midwestern United States, we were surrounded by English, which was super powerful. So for us it was like, okay, no English in the house with the kids. Obviously between us we do a lot of English, but the kids hear that.
And they picked it up, yes, and they were surprised by age, is it 3 or 4, and then I was fluent, she could understand exactly what we're saying. But then she translated it back to either Spanish or Yoruba. That's what you said, I understand. They were like, oh my gosh, we can't have any secrets anymore. So yeah.
It's funny, yeah. And so that's kind of what we did, and it helped a lot, right? It helped because the children, they learned for a time that English was only what adults speak, and so they could pick up on it, especially our eldest could pick up on it, but they were never required to speak it, and so they never really developed that speaking portion of English, even though they could understand a good bit. So they really developed their Spanish, their Castellano, and their Yoruba. So they were basically bilingual in those 2, but then understanding more and more English. And we knew they would get English no matter what. I mean, in many parts of the world.
Exactly, and also they have fundamental 2 other languages. It makes it easier for them to pick up another language like English, for example.
Right. And we also did literacy, because I know that in research, literacy is very important for children at a young age. And so you read to them, you train them, you teach them, so they need to become literate in at least one language, even if that's something completely different, like, for example, Mandarin Chinese or something, where it's in a completely different script. It doesn't matter, as long as they become literate in one language. Then once they go to school and they learn the local language, they'll be fine. They can jump into literacy in that very quickly. And in our case we were teaching them 3. So we read a lot of stories in Yoruba,
Spanish, as well as in English. Yes,
exactly. So the kids got all 3, but they got most literacy in Spanish and Yoruba, because Spanish and Yoruba are much easier to read. They're much more simple in the way that they're written and the way they're pronounced, and so it's easier for their brains to connect. So it's actually really nice for them to learn how to read in these languages, in these syllabic languages.
So we going back to the 3 reasons why we chose to not speak English to them in the house. Number 3 reason is
the benefits.
Yes.
And so if you search any sort of benefits of learning or speaking more than one language. So in the case of speaking more than one language in the house, when it comes to adults, I mean, you have a really better chance of having a good brain when you get older. So if you're constantly using language, it keeps Alzheimer's away, it keeps a lot of these things away, dementia, etc. So it keeps you sharper. But then as a child, there are so many benefits. There's cognitive benefits, developmental benefits.
It's amazing.
So with the benefits, like I just mentioned, you got cognitive benefits, right? Children have the ability to, by being able to know how to say something in more than one language, they're not bound to certain like stereotypes and certain things like that. They're able to see that, oh, okay, there's a lot of fluidity and ambiguity in language. And so they're able to understand more and more people and be able to pick up on more languages later on in life. And also when they're going through school, they actually are able to develop literacy and develop their writing skills, reading skills, etc., way beyond most children, simply because they have multiple languages that they can choose from, and they can actually understand language a lot better, and they just function a lot better when it comes to language, and even mathematics and things like that. They end up doing a lot better, simply because they have developed their brain a lot further than most people do at that age. So there's the benefits, those are cognitive benefits, those are learning benefits, but there's also economic benefits. So yeah, like Yoruba, for example, Spanish, English, all of these languages, they can benefit children in many ways, and then in the future for their employment even. And just knowing more than one language for many jobs will up their pay a ton, right? And then also knowing other languages can help them in practical ways, right? Whether it's it can expand their ability to travel, it can expand their employment opportunities, and it can also expand their educational opportunities, because then they could study abroad or even apply for university, schools, etc. in other parts of the world. So it just expands and opens them to even bigger parts of the world than they would have normally, and it also already allows them to be, reading news, thinking about, what's going on in these other countries, and
broaden their mindset too.
Exactly.
And number two reason for why we chose to not speak English in the house is the community. So my mother tongue is Yoruba. We spoke it in the house. That's my first language. I learned everything in Yoruba. To be able to just talk between themselves, like for example, if they're in a public space and they want to say something privately, and everyone's speaking English left and right, they can always switch to Spanish. And they're in a Spanish community, they can always switch to Yoruba. Boom, boom, boom. They can always change. So there's a community, they know they have that. So you see them. You see the Pablanu kids. They have their own. Their own community is speaking, and actually other kids actually want to learn how they speak. They want to learn how to, you're saying this in Yoruba, you're saying it in Spanish, teach me how to say this. And all these other kids want to be part of that community too. So it's amazing how language can bring kids together in that way. Yeah,
it definitely makes our kids tight, because they have these shared experiences within these languages and whatnot, and then they see, and we had to train them from the beginning, like saying, okay, don't speak English within the house, right? Especially to each other. You can speak English with friends, with family outside of the house, right? And so we had to, of course, lay those boundaries. And every once in a while, we have to enforce them a little bit. But they get it, they get it, especially the eldest ones. They get it by now, and they're able to handle it a lot better. So yeah, it's been really good for them. They've been really close, and they go out and they switch between Spanish, Yoruba. But then as soon as another child comes, they're able to speak to them in English. And it's been really good. They've actually learned, since we've been here in Uganda, because there's so much more community for them here, they've actually developed, their English has skyrocketed. Like now I hear them speaking English, and it's really funny because I've never heard them speak English before.
They have funny accents too, the first time actually speaking it with outside.
Sometimes they sound very American, sometimes they sound very Hispanic, sometimes they sound very Yoruba. Like it's kind of funny. The number one reason that we teach our kids these languages in-house and we don't speak English to them is inheritance. It's our inheritance to them. So in my case, my Spanish is my second language. It's a language that I put a lot of time and effort into to learn. I have many degrees in it. I had to pay money to learn it. I spent a lot of time and effort, developing my skills in it, as well as other languages. But that was the one that we decided on. And it's my inheritance to them, right? It's my blood and sweat that I put into it. And who knows? We may have nothing else to give them later on in life, but at least we'll have given them this, and they can do what they want with it. It'll be a benefit, right, to them, no matter what.
Yeah, and for me, it's my mother tongue, and that's my first language. That's what I grew up speaking, and I didn't learn it at school. She's the one who actually taught me, and it was really easy. Yes, it was easy. I was trying to say that it was easy. There was not much effort to it. It was so effortless. So I was like, I would like my children to be able to also have that, to be able to have that inheritance, and also Yoruba is a big language in the world now. So it's an inheritance we're passing down.
Because there's so much culture connected to it. I mean, there's all the sayings in Yoruba. There's all the songs in Yoruba.
Lots of songs, yes.
They wouldn't have any of that if they didn't know Yoruba. They would just say, what's that African thing you said? Tell me an African story. Tell me, like they wouldn't know. Oh yeah, the stories, all the stories in Yoruba.
And you know that Yoruba culture is a...
Fables.
Yes, it's a, what do you call that?
It's an oral, well, it was an oral language for a long
Yes, it
time.
was an oral language for, yes. And even till now, people still depend on those stories and the songs that mean a lot. There's a lot of songs and proverbs. So I'm fortunate and I'm glad to be able to pass that on down to them. Yeah.
And they're able to speak with their great-grandmother.
Their great-grandmother, they are
who doesn't speak English.
Yeah, the only great-grandchildren that are able to speak to their great-grandmother in Yoruba. Every other children in the family only spoke English. I mean, now we're...
Even the ones in Nigeria.
Even the ones in Nigeria. So now we are sort of inspiring all these family members to start teaching their children as well in Yoruba. So, which is encouraging, yeah. However, it's not easy. It's not easy. Someone saying, oh yeah, it looks nice, it looks easy. It takes effort, it takes determination and perseverance. There are many times that I wanted to give up, but what came to my mind was
the alternative.
Yes, and I already saw a video about, is it the Mighty Maclaw, where this lady, I forgot her name, Ami, she with the twins. You probably guys know them, the twins. She's from Nigeria, and she interviewed her mother on that show, and she said, "Why didn't you teach me Yoruba?" She's grown now. We were little. We came to America. Why didn't you teach me? And her mother said, "You were 4 years old and you didn't want to learn Yoruba, so I just didn't teach you because you didn't want to learn." And she said, "Mama, I was 4 years old. What did I know?
What do I know?
Yeah, I didn't know anything better, So that always stuck with me every time, because there are times where I'll just say, let's speak English, it's easier. Oh my gosh, it's so much easier. But then that always comes to the back of my mind, like, I need to persevere, because later on in life they will start saying, why didn't you teach me your mother tongue? And what would I say? You said you didn't want to learn it and I just gave up. So it's difficult, but perseverance, not giving up and seeing the alternative and seeing the future, what will be. Yeah.
Exactly. And if you're interested in doing this, you can do it at any stage of your child's childhood. It's much easier before they hit puberty.
Right.
So before 10, before 8, before 6 is even better.
Right.
But even if they're that old, you can still be working on it. One thing that I see a lot of parents do is that they will, maybe even from birth, they only speak that language to their child,
Right, yes.
but they never require their child to speak back to them in that language. And so the children never get it. As a professor of languages in the U.S. And especially of Spanish, when I was teaching Spanish, I would have students come in who were raised in Spanish, but they were never required to speak back in Spanish. Just like our kids, for the first few years of their lives, the only English they got was very little, and it was only hearing us speak it, not actually being required to speak it. So if we asked them to say something in English, they couldn't do it, right? Same thing for these students. They would be 19, 20, 21 years old, and they would say, listen, I understand everything you're saying, profe, but I can't speak it, and it was a real shame, because they had to go down to like the lowest levels of Spanish sometimes when they should have been at the highest from the beginning, right? So that's actually, if you think about it monetarily, their parents, if they had required them just to speak back to them and maybe read some with them, they would have saved thousands and thousands of dollars in higher education by skipping so many of these classes, just by doing that little extra work with their children. So if you're interested in doing this, if you have another language in your belt, really consider doing it. But like Anu said, be consistent. Be consistent. It's not easy. Be consistent. Start from the beginning. Don't give up. And for us, we decided, even before we were married, we talked about it at least. And we really decided, once our first child once you were pregnant with our first child. And then, but it was still funny. I gotta tell the funny story. So in the hospital, here we had already decided this and everything. But then in the hospital, here you're holding your child, and you speak to her saying, "Oh, sweetie, da, 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 da." I'm like, "Honey, what are you doing?" And you're like, "But she's so light skinned." I was like, "Honey, she's your daughter. What is this?" Like we talked about
And also,
this.
you see, you're in America, you see a cute baby, of course, the first thing comes to your mind, speak English, should be cutesy and something, you know. But it took a while, a long while for me to go back to the, how would Yoruba woman do it?
Yeah.
How did my mother do it? So
In general, it was just, you just had never done that in the
never
U.S.
done it.
Right? Talking
to a little
children.
child. Even my
Right, because even your nephew, you wouldn't speak Yoruba to.
exactly, and older people, even my younger brother in his 20s, it was feeling weird talking to these little children because they don't speak English to little children, you know.
Right.
So it feels weird to do it, but they see us doing it now, and everyone's doing it. They want to speak in Yoruba or Spanish to their little one, and it's encouraging. It encourages us, and we're inspiring people to start speaking their mother tongue and teaching their children their mother tongue.
Yeah, and a lot of people do it in many parts of the world, even within the United States.
Yeah.
People, it's funny. People have like a block. They're like, "Oh, we can't do that," or maybe it's too difficult for children or something. But when it comes down to it, I mean, if you think about many populations in the U.S., look at Vietnamese children.
Right.
Can you imagine them not speaking Vietnamese?
Right.
If you look at some of these Indian children, can you imagine them not speaking Gujarati, not speaking Hindi? Like, can you imagine that?
Oh,
It's
gosh.
incomprehensible.
Yeah,
Or
and Koreans come
Yeah,
here to
Koreans,
America. Yeah, they
Chinese.
speak Korean to the
yeah, they do it.
actually, yeah, but one thing that
So why can't everyone else?
exactly, because my brother who were literally just moved to the US, he was saying that it's very disgraceful to be speaking Yoruba outside. So we gotta not embrace it. There's nothing. It's a beautiful language. Why embrace it and speak it? Be proud about it. Chinese, for example, they go to the store, you hear them loud. No, you know that's Chinese. You know they're very
Yeah,
expressive.
they're
They
proud of
embrace
it. Why would they
proud
not
of
speak it?
Yeah.
They say, why would we not teach our children?
Exactly.
Why would we not do that? You know, it's just like, they are Chinese, so why would they not do this?
我不知道，我不知道，
我不知道，
我不知道。
我不知道. Yeah, so like, why not?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
So yeah, don't feel weird about it or bad about it. You know, if you want to do it, just do it. Just do it. Instill it in your children,
Yeah.
and make sure that they understand that it's their language too.
Yeah.
It's now theirs, right, as well. And yeah, just take ownership of it and help them take ownership of it as well. And,
Yeah.
so if you have any more questions, if you have anything that, if you're interested in doing this, but you still have some doubts or some worries or anything like that, or if you're just curious and you want to know more, just comment below and let us know kind of what you're thinking, what you'd like to know more about, tips, tricks, anything like that, anything that might help you, just ask us because we don't know what you need.
Right.
Just let us know what you need and we'll
Yes.
try to make videos and try to respond to that.
Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this this video. If our videos pique your interest, please like, share, and subscribe. We're on social media. We want to see our day-to-day posts about our life here in the Pearl of Africa. And check us out on TikTok and Instagram as well as Facebook, Familia Pablanu. Well, until next time, I will say, and the Pearl of Africa, Mwekale. Mwekale.
We got it.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Odabo.
Odabo. Adios.